What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Eye Test, where we simplify your process as a fantasy football manager. I'm here with Bobby and Paul, and today we are doing running back rankings in tiers. And we've found, through our experience that, it's nice to know who the number one overall running back's going to be, and the number 10, the number 30, who's going to bust. But what's really important is breaking these players down into categories based off of volume, essentially. So we feel like these players that are in their specific tiers are going to be scoring around the same amount of points and having the same amount of week-to-week scores. So we're in for a good episode tonight. Thank you for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to go ahead and press that like button and subscribe to our channel. We are growing every day. We're almost at 100 subscribers. Help us get to 100 subscribers, guys. We've been putting in the work. It hasn't even been a full year yet. We're about to have our full NFL season underway, and we're here to get you guys ready for the fantasy season. So we're going to start off with running back rankings. The first ranking is the S tier. Now, some people have mixed reviews on what S stands for. Paul, you had an interesting comment on what S stands for the other day.
I think it might stand for super tier.
Yeah, I was thinking star. But either way.
I like that better, actually.
Stud?
Maybe? Stud's a good one, too.
Yeah. So whatever it is, everyone else does it this way. It seems to really work when we draft. We'll go into more draft strategies as we get into like the A and B tiers. I know Paul has a good strategy on basically what the end of a better tier looks like versus like the better part of the next one, so that we can talk about that. We've got some spicy takes in our A tier, so make sure to keep watching to see who's in our A tier, because some people may think that more people belong in this, but we at the Eye Test do not. So we're going to go over all of that, starting off with the S tier. We've got Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. So these are your consistent upside guys. You're expecting, 18 points. We're going to get a lot of reception volume out of these running backs. Paul, how about you take us through the S tier in CMC?
Sure. So with Christian McCaffrey, I mean, this is relatively easy. He's been a superstar his entire career when he's healthy. I know that he had, was it 2 years where he was facing some health issues, but he came back last year and finished as the RB2 in PPR and standard, I believe. Yes. And so he's got elite pass catching ability. He's a very efficient runner. He's in the best offense that he's ever been in his life with Kyle Shanahan, who loves to do creative things with his skill set position players. So again, sky's the limit here for CMC as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. There's really not much to say about CMC. We know what he is when he's on the field. The only thing I will say maybe that could wouldn't knock him down a tier, but could knock down his production maybe a little bit, is if Elijah Mitchell actually stays healthy this season. Big if, but CMC wasn't really didn't have God level production when Elijah Mitchell was playing last year. So it's just something to watch for, but obviously he belongs in this S tier as a stud running back.
Yeah, and two things that CMC has for him. Like you said, he's got the reception volume, so I think even if Elijah Mitchell is in, CMC is still going to be catching passes. And then he's also got Sam Darnold as his number one quarterback, so he should have a really good year next year. Another guy in the S.
I think S tier is actually for Sam Darnold.
Yeah,
that's why McCaffrey's up there.
The Sam tier.
And then the other guy that finished as the RB1 last year, Austin Eckler, he's still up there. He's going to be a top 5 pick in your redraft leagues. But in terms of running backs, he is that stud, star, super performer, and he's right up there with CMC. So, Bob, what's your take on Austin Eckler for the 2023 redraft season?
It's basically the same deal with CMC. You know what type of production you're getting with him when he's on the field. He's going to catch the ball. He's going to run it efficiently. Again, there is a little asterisk with his production this coming season, and that's huge if Mike Williams and Keenan Allen could stay healthy. So that could take away some passing volume for him if they manage to stay healthy all year. Do I expect them to, especially Mike Williams? Probably not. But Austin Eckler deserves to be in this S tier, and he's going to be an easy top 5 pick come draft season.
I think Bob hit the nail on the head. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is Eckler has had some contract issues. He's not very happy with his current state. And unlike another player that we'll get to, I think Eckler's team, if he is traded, can affect his fantasy value slightly. I'm not sure if I'm willing to knock him out of this S tier unless he goes to like the Chiefs, who just share the ball around. But I think you just got to monitor what Eckler does this offseason. If they do trade him, it could affect how he plays. But I think if he stays on the Chargers, yeah, lock him in as a top 5 overall pick, and certainly in a top three running back finish for fantasy this year.
And as we get into the deeper tiers, the next one is the A tier. So these guys are still going to be first round picks in your redraft league in a 12-team league, but they are dropped down a notch. Some because of age, some because of the type of offense they're in, and then others would just be maybe like consistency. So as we get into our A tier, we're faced with Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs. Derrick Henry, that's definitely a spicy one, Paul. I'm not sure if you have an opinion on that. Do you think that he belongs in the S tier, or you think the A tier is where he belongs?
I think the A tier is absolutely where he belongs. I mean, he is Mr. Tried and True himself. He is essentially guaranteed for 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns every year. He's the focal point of this offense. He's an absolute bulldozer. They got a rookie quarterback, so I think they're going to lean on Henry even more than with Ryan Tannehill. I mean, Ryan Tannehill might still play, but Will Levis, I think, will get a lot of starts this year. But I think Derrick Henry is just an anomaly. No matter how old he gets, until he turns like 32 or until I actually see his production fail, I am never going to vote against the guy.
So what makes him part of the A tier then, Bob?
Like Paul said, you just know exactly what you're getting from him year in and year out. And another massive thing, besides for that 1 year where he had that foot injury, he doesn't miss time and he consistently produces. Last year, he had a career high in receptions. So if that actually continues, I know it's crazy considering that he's almost 30. He could still even be better than last year. So, especially if the Titans manage to improve even a little bit. Again, with this A tier, these are guys that you know for a fact are going to produce, and there aren't really that many questions with them. So, Derrick Henry is just a guy that he might go after Saquon and Josh Jacobs in leagues, but the production will probably be very similar.
So then I guess what I should have asked is what keeps him from joining the S tier group of guys? Anyone want to speak on that?
I'm glad you asked that, John, because I actually thought about this when I put Henry in that A tier. And the only reason he's in that A tier for me instead of that S tier is because I like more receivers in the draft than I do Derrick Henry. So
Okay.
I am definitely drafting the likes of Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, all in that same little area right there. But I think there are some other receivers that I like over Derrick Henry and these other two running backs on the list. So that's where I kind of set the fold.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. Like as we've been displaying on our social media accounts, which are listed below in our description. You can follow us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. We talk about how the running back position, the value of it is decreasing as the years go on, as the NFL turns into a running back by committee offensive scheme. And you're right, wide receivers, we were proven last year that there are wide receivers that are more valuable than running backs. I think that's a good point. Derrick Henry's reception volume is not there compared to like the Travis Kelce's and the Jamar Chases and, Stephon Diggs even. So players like that. So that's a very good point. Speaking of receptions, this guy does get a pretty good amount of receptions. That's Saquon Barkley. So he joins Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs here. Bob, what's your take on Saquon Barkley for the 2023 season? You think he's going to produce better? Like, do you think the Giants' offense is better than last year? Because that's kind of where I'm leaning.
I'd say they're slightly better to marginally better with making a couple of the additions that they had this offseason with Darren Waller, Jalen Hyatt, but no one really that takes their offense, in my opinion, to like the next level, unless Daniel Jones is going to take that leap, which I think pretty much what he was last year is what he's going to be for the rest of his career, which is
Same.
still good. But I think Saquon Barkley is one of the biggest winners of this offseason. Again, not too many additions that are going to take away from his workload. He's heavily involved in the passing game. He's efficient when he runs the ball, and the offense is going to be running through him. So again, he belongs in this A tier because you know exactly what he's going to be doing game in and game out, and there's no real questions there.
I agree with everything Bob said there with Saquon. And I would just wanted to touch on where I said that Austin Eckler, him changing teams does concern me very slightly. Saquon Barkley, I know that he hasn't signed his franchise tag. I know that he wants that big deal. I know there's some speculation on whether they trade him or where he goes. But if Saquon Barkley, wherever he goes, whoever is willing to give him that money and sign him up for that workload, I think he is going to still produce at that same level in this A tier, where Austin Eckler is a bit more pass catching reliant than Saquon, where Saquon can tote the rock 20, 25 times a game, get you 100 yards and a score, where Eckler really makes his bread and butter when you look up and he's got 9, 10, 11, 12 catches for 88 yards. So that I think Saquon is a surefire A tier here, no matter where he goes.
Agreed. Yeah, and especially, he's still young. He showed last year that even after his injuries, he still got it. And he does seem to be still the focal point of the Giants offense, even after the draft, which is why Bobby said that he's one of the biggest winners of the offseason. One of the biggest winners of last season, someone we did not even see coming. He was a member of the running back dead zone in the 6th round of redraft leagues. Josh Jacobs finds himself in the A tier, which is probably the first time that he's found himself in that tier since he's joined the league. Welcome, Josh Jacobs, Paul. What do you have to say to him?
I want to personally say thank you for him leading my dynasty backfield last year. I got a lot of crap from a lot of the league because I drafted him in the 5th round or 6th round. And I was like, yeah, I hate 25-year-old running backs who are the clear-cut starter on their team. But nonetheless, Josh Jacobs, I look for a lot of the same this year. I don't know if he will play as well as he did just because he was great last year. He was so great. I don't know if we're going to get all of that this year, but a lot of things have stayed the same. They signed him to a franchise tag deal, so they're going to squeeze every bit out of him in 1 year that they can. And he got Jimmy Garoppolo, Mr. Checkdown himself, and Josh McDaniels is the returning head coach. And with no Waller, it just leaves more room in that offense for Jacobs and even Devontae Adams to get more volume. So I really like Jacobs here in the A tier.
Paul, you hit the nail on the head. You are cooking today. I completely agree with everything you said. Again, with these A-tier running backs, pretty much their situations haven't changed at all from last year, and they're just going to consistently produce. Nothing has changed with Josh Jacobs. He's still going to be catching passes out of the backfield. They call it a career year for a reason. Maybe he doesn't duplicate exactly what he did last year or eclipse that, but there's no reason to think that he won't be getting the same amount of volume that he did last year, and that should easily result in another RB1 season.
And as we get into the next tier, so this is a tier break after Josh Jacobs, so we're starting to see less consistency, maybe less ceiling games, but still definitely the potential we've seen these guys hit 30 points, 40 points before, but it's just not going to happen as often as your Derrick Henrys and your Ecklers and all that. So we break into the B tier. We start off with Jonathan Taylor. Paul, Jonathan Taylor is getting a lot of hype this offseason, and I think that's pretty natural for a running back that has a little bit of an off year. And it makes sense. I mean, Saquon had an off year after his injury and came back. Who else did we see that with? I guess you could throw Josh Jacobs in there too, although he didn't have as serious of an injury as Saquon. But Jonathan Taylor, he is expected a very productive year on this newly established Colts offense. Paul, why do you think Jonathan Taylor belongs in the B tier?
I think that Jonathan Taylor belongs in the B tier just because let's not forget that this young kid was 1 year removed from being the consensus RB1 in 2021 and an absolute dumpster fire of a year in 2022. I mean, God, they hired Jeff Saturday out of the analyst booth to be the head coach.
Forgot
Dude,
about
I
that.
was so high on Saturday.
Yeah, and then they like beat the Raiders, and everybody's like, "Give this man a long-term contract." I'm like,
That
dude,
was
he has
me.
no idea what he's doing. Like Matt Ryan led team meetings. Like Jeff Saturday didn't even. But I digress. So I still think the ceiling is there for this kid. I mean, he's an all-time talent. Last year was a dumpster fire. I have him in this B tier just because I don't like him as much as those other guys that we discussed. But the talent is still there. Let's see if a new scheme and a new head coach can propel him to where he needs to be. But yeah, I think he's still got all the talent. He's young. I'm hoping that it was just a dumpster fire of a year for him because Jonathan Taylor is good for fantasy football.
This is a guy that probably at the beginning of last season would have been in the S tier in a lot of people's running back tiers. So he's fallen down a little bit. And I personally think there's good reason for it. Not that he can't ascend back into the A tier, but there's serious questions with him now. The Colts, like you said, Colts have a new offense. Colts have a new quarterback who, by all accounts, is going to be raw, is going to be probably running a lot. And what that means is when they get to the goal line, there's going to be a decent chance that he's going to vulture touchdowns away from Jonathan Taylor. Is Jonathan Taylor going to be getting those checkdowns also like he was getting when he had that career year? So there's a lot of questions with him still. I think he's going to have a better year than he did last year because hopefully he stays healthy the entire time. And last year was just, like you said, Paul, a dumpster fire. So you expect him to have a better year this year, but I'm just not sure if we're ever going to see that like career year RB1 year again from him. I need to see it to believe it because it's a completely different team now. So that's why he's knocked down into this B tier for me.
And then we also have Nick Chubb, who is turning that dreadful age that we always love to talk about, which does play a pretty big role in the eye test. However, Chubb is, age aside, he is passing the eye test. He can handle the workload. He gets touchdowns. Doesn't have much reception upside, which is most likely the reason we're finding him in the B tier. Same with his age. However, he does have somewhat of an open backfield this year because Kareem Hunt, we're expecting him to be traded. He didn't move a team yet, right?
He's
We're
a
just
free
expecting
agent.
him. He's a free agent
agent.
still. Okay. So he does have the backfield all to himself. And it looks like it could stay that way. So, Bob, what do you have to say about Nick Chubb being in the B tier?
I think if there's any running back that basically describes the entire B tier, that is the B tier of running backs, it is Nick Chubb. You know he's going to be a staple. You know he's going to produce, but he probably doesn't have that killer upside unless he is running for like 200 yards and has a few touchdowns as well. You're not going to see him really drop, a 35-point game probably. His upside, his like major upside is probably like, 28 to 30 points on a very, very, very good week. Because, like you said, he doesn't have that receiving upside that you see with a lot of these other running backs. But he actually did have a career high in receptions last year. So maybe that changes with Deshaun Watson there, Kareem Hunt leaving. I know some people are high on Jerome Ford, but Jerome Ford is just, a career backup, or he's just irrelevant to me. So Nick Chubb pretty much just describes the entire B tier for me. There's no better running back to have in the B tier than Nick Chubb.
Yeah, no, Bob, I totally agree. I mean this with complete sincerity. Nick Chubb is the Walmart version of Derrick Henry, and I mean that very, very kindly. Nick Chubb is good for 1,100, 1,200 yards a year and 10 touchdowns. And he's not going to put up 30, 35, 40 points for you, but you're going to look down most weeks and see 15 to 20 there. And if Chubb falls to you in like the mid to late second round, even early third, you are happy as a camper because you got a pretty much a rock solid RB10, top 10 RB right there.
Yep. And then this guy's up and coming, but he's all alone in the New England offense. That's Ramondre Stevenson. Paul, Where do you like this spot from Ramondre?
I
Wait,
do.
and real quick, while you speak on that, I'm gonna go turn my air conditioning on because I'm so hot.
Okay. No, I love Ramondre Stevenson here. I actually potentially could see him moving into the A tier halfway through this season. I think that the backfield is all his. His receiving upside is incredible. They just brought in Bill O'Brien to be the offensive coordinator, so now Mac Jones doesn't have Matt Patricia calling plays for him. He actually has an offensive-minded coach who has been successful as a head coach in this league. And Ramondre Stevenson, if you watched him, he absolutely passes the eye test. The dude is utterly electric with the ball in his hands. I think they're going to scheme up a lot of things for him. So I'm really excited to see what Ramondre does this year.
An offensive-minded offensive coordinator. What a novel idea from the Patriots.
Finally.
Yeah, right. Belichick was like, no, I think Patricia can call plays. This is a good idea.
So funny. But I'm Ramondre Stevenson actually caught nearly 70 passes last year out of the backfield, which is crazy. I don't know if you could expect that again, but I think he is deserving of being in this B tier because there's no one going to be, threatening his workload or anything like that. And he did pass the eye test with flying colors last year. So even if there is a little bit of a regression in terms of receptions, he should still be very efficient and still catch his fair share of passes out of the backfield. And I don't think I would, there's a couple guys here that I would probably take over him, but he could easily be, a second round pick come draft season.
Oh yeah.
Do you guys know if he fumbled the ball a lot last year? I don't know why that's like in my head right now.
I'm not sure.
No. I feel like we'd have to ask the owner of Ramondre on fantasy. They definitely know.
So he had 4 fumbles last year. It's not terrible. It's not ideal.
Yeah, 4's a lot. Ball security. He'll work on it as he gets deeper into his career. This guy, he hasn't started his career yet. Everyone's wondering, where the hell are you guys putting Bijan Robinson? Well, right now we have him in the B tier, which is far better than what Sleeper has him at, which is at a 110 ADP, average draft position for all of our newbies out there. That's crazy. That needs to change. Bijan should be a second-round running back, in my opinion. And as we get closer to the season, I'll probably be drafting him at the 111.
Someone's going to reach for him in the first round. It's not even necessarily a reach. It's just would be a risky pick for a guy that you haven't seen take the field yet.
Yeah, so dive deeper into that, Bob.
So, you could definitely make an argument for having him in the A tier. I understand. I have him in Dynasty. He was the clear-cut 101 in Dynasty rookie drafts, and there's good reason for it. He can do everything on the field, but I'm not ready to put him in the A tier for redraft. Again, it's just risky. If you're talking about drafting a running back in the first round, a rookie running back in the first round, it's just a risky play. But I think he is safe here in the B tier where he will have similar production with guys like Tony Pollard, Breece Hall coming off injury, Ramondre Stevenson. I just don't know if he's guaranteed that workload like Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley just yet, because we need to see if the Falcons just completely bail on Tyler Algier as well.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, we're in sync today. The only thing for me here with Bijan is just how exactly the Falcons roll this offense out. I mean, Algier was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. Just curious to see how it plays, but you don't draft this kid number 8 overall if you're not going to use him. All
right, perfect. And I think we got 2 more left in this tier. I think what we'll do is we'll carry on with our typical format, and then once we break into the C and D tiers, it seems like we're agreeing a lot today, so let's just go, we'll have Bob talk about one player, Paul talk about the next, just for the sake of time. You guys cool with that?
Yeah.
Well, for now, we'll continue with the same format for the rest of the B tier. So up next, Bob, you want to talk on, you already talked on Bijan. All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
My dog is just playing with her toy on the ground. It's loud as shit.
Oh yeah, let's get Sadie. Let's get Sadie's point of view on Brees Hall real quick, because Brees Hall is the next guy in the B tier here. We saw potential upside last year. We just didn't see enough of it. So we feel like the B tier is the safe tier. Bob, you like the Jets. How about you go ahead and talk about Brees Hall?
I
Bob,
think
you like the Jets.
I do like the Jets, John. I am a Jets fan, for those that don't know. Brees Hall, I think if he stayed healthy all year, would have been in my A tier, in our A tier, I think, if he stayed healthy all year. He was just starting to hit his stride before he got injured, unfortunately. So he gets knocked down a tier here. Of course, we're assuming that he's going to be healthy at the beginning of the season. And if he is, then he's just going to do what he was doing last year. He was efficient. The Jets, drafted Israel. I forget his last name.
Anaconda. Anaconda.
Avada Kedavra.
Anaconda. But he doesn't really have any threats to his workload when he comes back and is fully healthy. Again, he does everything as well, runs the ball, catches it out of the backfield, and he's electric as well. So he's well deserving of being in this B tier. But the reason he's here is because he's coming off an ACL tear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any last words, Paul?
Eye test. Brees Hall is magnificent when he's healthy and running the ball. He's incredible to watch.
You know who else was incredible to watch last year? Tony Pollard. So he's the last guy. He's the last guy in our B tier. We're grouping him with these group of guys. Tony Pollard, Paul. Before we get into the C tier here, talk about Tony Pollard.
So we love Tony Pollard here. We finally get to see him in a workhorse role. He is one of the few running backs in this league that is a true home run threat when he gets the ball, whether that's catching the ball or running the ball. We've seen him break giant runs. We've seen him catch screen passes and take him to the house. He is just electrifying and very fun to watch. And even to John's begrudgment, this Cowboys offense is good and talented and has a lot of stars outside of Dak Prescott. So there's a lot of threats to look out for. It gives Tony Pollard just enough room to find those creases and hit those home runs. He could be a grand slam. The only thing, the reason I have him really in this B tier is because we have not seen him handle a full workload yet. We haven't seen him be a workhorse back. He's always come in with fresh legs. He's always come in, with plays designed specifically for him. He's not taking as much beatings as he would as a full workhorse back in pass blocking scenarios, or even just running that 1st and 10, getting that 3 or 4 yards. So just curious to see how that plays out. But this kid really does have, I keep calling these guys kids, these adults, these grown men he has a very, very high ceiling.
So this is a tier break here. So we're going to get into the C tier. Now, let's just go ahead. This is where it gets pretty important when it comes to your redraft strategy. So I alluded to this in the beginning here, Paul. Go ahead what you were talking about this morning when we were talking about like the tier break. So, for example, Josh Jacobs is at the back end, whatever you want to call it. He's the last player listed in tier A. And then you have Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Ramondre in tier B. If you're looking at the draft board and, Derrick Henry's gone, Saquon Barkley's gone, you're staring at Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb. Who are you drafting and why?
Yeah, so in that scenario, I'm definitely taking Josh Jacobs because he is the final man in that tier. Where it starts to get a little iffy is when you have a full B list tier. So say you're the pick after Jacobs goes and you need a running back, and you're looking at Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, and Ramondre Stevenson as guys that you could draft who are not going to make it back to you in your next pick. So then it comes down to personal preference. Did you want to try and hit a home run with Jonathan Taylor, who could regain form? He was the RB1 2 years ago. Did you want to take that route? Or did you want to draft Nick Chubb, who's the tried and true top 8 RB, who you're going to get consistent points from, you're going to have, good weeks consistently. And then you're looking at Ramondre Stevenson, maybe you're in a PPR league and you're like, you know what? I think Ramondre can get 7-8 passes a game and he can really light up the world in PPR. So at that point, it just comes down to what kind of drafter you are, what kind of fantasy football team you want to have. Do you want to take the safe route and maybe go Chubb? Or maybe you're looking for the home run with Jonathan Taylor, or maybe you're looking for the PPR machine and Ramondre Stevenson. So these tier lists are just supposed to help you. When all is said and done, we believe that these guys in these tiers should have similar production to the peers for the other guys that are in their tier with them. Now, there is going to be some discrepancies, but what it comes down to is, did you want to have Jonathan Taylor have a 30-point game, but then maybe an 8-point game? Did you want to have Chubb, who's got two 16-point games in a row? It just comes down to personal preference on how you want to manage your fantasy football team.
Well said. Let's go right into tier C here. We'll just do 1 and 1 here as we get wrap up. You're shaking your head, Bob. Not a fan?
No, I was just getting ready. I was just getting
okay. I think you're like, no. Let's talk for another hour.
I'm excited to talk about Travis
Harris.
I'm excited to talk about Travis Etienne is what I'm excited about.
Well, there
You
we
can
go.
take
How about we
Travis
start it
Etienne.
off? Travis Etienne
Bring
is
it
the
up.
first guy we're going to list in tier C. Bob, take it away.
So I love talking about guys that have either risen or fallen. And Travis Etienne, I think if you were talking about him at the end of the season, you could easily have had him in the B tier and made an argument for him to be in the B tier. He had a very good year last year, but I think there are some concerns which put him in the C tier now. Now, he still is the RB1 in Jacksonville, but this is a smaller concern, but they did draft Tank Bigsby in the draft, so maybe it threatens his workload a little bit. But the biggest thing that concerns me with Etienne is the upside in the passing game wasn't there last year, which was supposedly one of his strengths. So that's very concerning for me. And this kind of, I feel like, is going to be a make or break it year for Travis Etienne in terms of if we're going to see him, maybe be a consistent RB1 in fantasy. He'll still be relevant for years to come, but is he going to consistently be an RB1 like some of these other guys? I think for him to reach that ceiling, he has to catch a lot of passes, and he didn't do it last year. He had some great games, and he had some really bad games where he just disappeared. So that's why he falls in the C tier for me. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
And then up next, we got Najee Harris, a guy who had a very slow start to the season last year, but really picked it up, as did the whole Steelers offense, honestly, in the second half of the year. So we got Najee Harris falling into the C tier. Paul, what do you have to say about Najee and his stats for the 2023 redraft season?
So even though I hate the Steelers, I'm going to put my bias aside here, believe it or not. And I want to love Najee Harris in fantasy football. I want to love him. I want to put him in higher tiers, but he just hasn't shown it. He has this volume. He has this workhorse volume that he just constantly is underwhelming. And yes, it is nice that he did finish the year relatively strong last year. I wonder how much of that Liz Frank injury or whatever he had that was bothering him at the beginning of the season, how much that hindered him. But even before that, we saw 2 years ago, Najee was just inefficient, and he was catching check down after check down after check down. He was getting 15, 16, 17, 18 points on like 60 total scrimmage yards. It's because Ben Roethlisberger was just dishing the rock out so much 2 years ago. And then Kenny Pickett comes in, or Mitchell Trubisky started the year, and Najee was not great. Kenny Pickett comes in, starts seeing him roll there. So I love Najee Harris as a talent. I really hope that his fantasy football game improves and he becomes more efficient, but I need to see him break out some bigger runs and some bigger plays before I move him up a tier.
I'd say this guy up next is in the same situation. Honestly, probably best we had Paul talk about Najee so that we can have Bob talk about J.K. Dobbins here, because I'm pretty sure I heard Paul say, "What, dude? J.K.'s not in the S tier?" And so we were like, Paul, we're trying to give the people what they want here. They don't want J.K. Dobbins in the S tier.
Yeah. So when we came together, I didn't even have Dobbins in a tier.
I know.
No, I'm surprised with that. I like Dobbins a lot going into this season with the Lamar Jackson situation being cleared up, and J.K. Dobbins finishing the season very, very strong last year after he came off that brutal knee injury, kind of similar to the Javonte Williams situation right now. He was really good. And contrary to what a lot of people say, they're saying, oh, Baltimore's going to be throwing the ball all over the field and stuff. And they may throw the ball more, but this offense still runs through Lamar Jackson, who is known for his rushing ability. J.K. Dobbins is the RB1 on a run-heavy team that I think is still going to run the ball a lot. So I think he belongs in this C tier because, if you're a Gus Edwards truther, fine, but J.K. Dobbins is a clear lead back in Baltimore, and I think he's going to have a big year this year.
Yeah, and I think he showed much more flashes than Gus Edwards has. So it's clear that they're going to be using J.K. Dobbins here.
I used to be a Gus Edwards truther, though. I will
He was
admit it.
he was a good waiver wire guy. He was a league slut for a little bit.
Yeah.
I love betting on Gus Edwards touchdowns. That's
Oh
my
yeah,
favorite thing about
you
Gus
got to start
Edwards.
giving us the tips when you think he's going to score.
Oh, dude, I never make big bets, but when we play Jacksonville, I bet so much money on Gus Edwards' first touchdown score, and it happened
Once.
once, and now I will do it every game.
So then up next in the C tier, we got Aaron Jones, Paul. This can get pretty spicy because it looks like we started to notice his volume tick down last year, but last year was kind of an off season for the Packers. Are you expecting it to be different with Jordan Love under center?
I am expecting maybe much more of the same. Aaron Jones finished as the RB9 last year. I still kind of have him as a top 14 back for 2023. Now moving forward into 2024, let's talk about that afterwards. But as far in terms of this year, Aaron Jones is still the lead back in this backfield. A.J. Dillon is creeping up and can vulture some of those goal line touchdowns. But Matt LaFleur loves using Aaron Jones in the pass game. And although you will see some inflated games with Aaron Jones, he's still good for a 30 pop a couple times a year. So I think out of more respect for what he's done, we have him here in this tier.
Yeah, I feel like he does get like a good amount of carries. I think last year was when we really started to notice like somewhat of a true split with AJ Dillon. But I think towards the end of the year, they really started to pick up their rhythm with the offense, realizing that Aaron Jones can play a very valuable part in the passing game. He had a couple reception touchdowns last year. Granted, that's from a much better quarterback, but if Jordan Love can keep that going, then I think Aaron Jones, I think that him fitting into the C tier is just fine, considering the fact that his role is kind of depleting with A.J. Dillon improving. So now we move on to Miles Sanders. This guy was part of definitely like a you could say a rush happy offense in Philadelphia, but now he's gotten picked up by the Panthers in free agency. Miles Sanders has no real competition in that Carolina backfield. Bob, what do you have to say about Miles Sanders? Is he still a dead zone running back to you?
He still is a dead zone running back to me. You
That's
wouldn't catch
fair.
me. You wouldn't catch me dead drafting Miles Sanders just because I don't. No one could have predicted what he did really last year because he never showed much. I think I'll give you the credit for the Eagles there, but again, I'm going to go back kind of to the Nick Chubb like thing. This guy kind of epitomizes the C tier. Like, it's never been a question about him getting the ball or anything like that. It's just been a question of if there's the upside. Last year, you got the upside. He scored a lot of touchdowns. He had a lot of yards. He had a career year. Do I expect that again in Carolina, going to a much, much worse offense, much, good O-line, but not as good as the Eagles? I think he'll still be good, but I'm just not that high on him. But I think the fact that he's no competition, then he's going to get the ball a lot, puts him in this C tier. I think he's a good floor play this season.
Yeah. And like I feel like with a young quarterback and Bryce Young, though they probably will rely on Miles Sanders to punch it in the red zone. I'm interested to see if that's the case, especially since they do have like a top 10 offensive line. So
Yeah.
I think that strategy could work. So I do like Miles Sanders' touchdown upside, like what we saw last year. But yeah, he's not going to be playing like a valuable role in the passing game or anything like that. He'll get his 12 to 17 touches a game, and we'll see if he can score from it. This guy, he actually found a way to find the end zone a decent amount of times last year. He was a running back one, Dalvin Cook. However, we're not that high on Dalvin Cook this year. Paul, what do you have to say about Dalvin Cook?
I want to say thank you to Dalvin Cook. He has been a staple of fantasy football for the last couple of years, and it pains me to put him this low in the tier list, but I'm getting that Madison tingle, and I think that yeah,
It's
no, it
that
feels
time of
good.
year. It's
It
that
feels
time of
I
year.
know. It feels good, and Dalvin Cook is still the lead back in this backfield, and I think that he will still produce. I mean, like John said, he was a top 10 running back last year, so I think he will still produce at a high level this year, but he's not getting any younger. Alex Madison, they have him. I don't know his contract situation, but they're like, God, we have this like explosive guy just riding pine here. Maybe we should use these fresh legs every now and then. So I think that Dalvin Cook does lose some volume this year, but he'll still be a very, very safe back for your, if you have him as an RB2, that is very, very safe.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook's definitely one of those trickier guys where like you see his production from like you're drafting for 2023, you see his production from 2022 and you're like, why would I not take him in the second round, Why would I not? Why would I take Ramondre Stevenson over Dalvin Cook? Like that doesn't make sense. But we're making these rankings for next year, so there has to be some type of prediction. If we solely went off of the previous years for our next year's rankings, we would be wrong much more often. So, from our experience in fantasy football, we've seen once we start to notice a running back falling off, yeah, he was scoring touchdowns last year, but we're expecting that to change, especially since they re-signed or extended Alexander Madison for it shows that they're going to be utilizing him more and more. So we get into our tier break here. This guy, man, if we went off of 2022's rankings, we'd have him much higher, but we got to go off of the current events, and one of these current events is that a highly touted running back was drafted behind him. And we have Kenny Walker falling in the D tier, and he's got to deal with Zach Charbonnet stealing touches from him, Bob. It's sad, isn't it?
It is sad. I was never like crazy high. There were times when I would see Ken Walker being valued on the same level as Breece Hall, and I just never saw Ken Walker that like as that guy. Never really he passed the eye test, but he didn't really like pass it like Breece Hall did, where you just saw like the explosive, you saw the big plays. Like Ken Walker was more of like a consistent like floor guy than a ceiling guy like Breece Hall. So, and it doesn't help, obviously, like you said, with Zach Charbonnet now. I think Ken Walker could have been in the C tier if they didn't draft Zach Charbonnet. Maybe an argument could have been made for the B tier. But with Zach Charbonnet getting drafted that high in the draft now, he gets knocked down a few tiers, and it's gonna be risky drafting him. He could be a good value play if he falls far enough. But if you're thinking about reaching on Ken Walker, I would caution against it because we don't know how that situation is going to unfold in Seattle.
And this guy's in a new position, or a new team rather. DeAndre Swift finds himself on the Philadelphia Eagles in a crowded backfield, Paul. But we do think that DeAndre Swift, we want to pretend like they're going to be healthy all the time. And so if that were the case, Paul, we would have DeAndre Swift in the D tier with the type of production he puts up. So what type of production is he going to be like? What are his overall points going to be looking like week in, week out?
Yeah, so
That was
I
a
think
really horrible way to ask a question. Sorry
no,
about that.
I knew what you were trying to I knew what you were trying to do there. So I think no one could have benefited more from a change of scenery than DeAndre Swift. He goes to a rock solid, fire, explosive offense in Philadelphia, and I think that who's your guys' head coach? Sirianni. I think that Sirianni is going to play very well to DeAndre Swift's strengths, which is pass catching, getting him in open space. He's not really a between the tackles kind of guy. They're going to draw up some big plays for him. So I think that DeAndre Swift does have a lot of talent, but it is concerning that he has not been able to have a full season, I think, ever in his career. So if he stays healthy, I think talent will prevail and they will draw up enough plays for him to succeed here and have some good fantasy relevance.
Yeah, and I think that he's definitely someone that you can buy low at the moment. I know that's more of a dynasty term, but also someone that you could probably get at very good value in a redraft league. Like there's probably going to be a lot of people that are passing on DeAndre Swift and taking receivers. But if he's someone that falls to you in like the 4th round or something like that, or the 5th round, I think he is an easy scoop. The reason for that is just like you said, Paul, the change of scenery. And although it is a crowded backfield and Jalen Hurts obviously takes touches too, especially in the red zone, Rashad Penny, the running back behind DeAndre Swift, he gets hurt much more often than DeAndre Swift does. DeAndre Swift averages 13 games a year. Rashad Penny is averaging like 5. So there is a pretty high chance, there's a higher chance that DeAndre Swift could be the pure running back one on an Eagles offense, which we've seen did work out with Miles Sanders last year. Let's move on to another young running back. I guess we would just say that we think that Dameon Pierce we're not going to see many ceiling games out of him. We'll probably see a fair amount of, donuts or goose eggs, whatever we want to call them, but there are going to be those weeks where he's touching 20 points. What? Do you guys not agree?
Goose eggs.
You think
Yeah,
Dameon
goose
Pierce
eggs.
is going to throw up goose eggs?
Yeah, dude. In a D tier, you can totally. In a D tier, you're
No.
totally having goose egg games.
No,
Well-
dude, he's just starting back.
Yeah, he's
I understand, dude, but
well.
the
The re-
Texans.
The reason Dameon Pierce is in this D tier is not because there's a lack of talent. It's because of the team that he's on and the fact that, he did get hurt last year also. He didn't have that many ceiling games. All these guys above him, I would obviously take over him. I think we just need to see more from Dameon Pierce. They brought in Devin Singletary. So again, there's maybe a small question of how much Singletary will cut into his workload, but I don't expect it to be much. So is Dameon Pierce going to take the leap this year? But I think the D tier is perfect for him. He'll have a lot of floor games, and he should be a pretty consistent fantasy producer, probably in like the flex range for me.
Dameon Pierce had 4 games below 5 points last year, not including his injuries.
Oof. Yeah.
So I mean, that's what you get from a D tier, though. That's what you get.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have games where your starting running back or one of your flex guys loses you a week. That's what a D tier is, and we'll see that with Kenny Walker. We'll see it with DeAndre Swift. You'll see it with any Eagles running back ever, because sometimes they just don't. They're not going to run the ball. So
Oh, damn.
keep
he
that
did.
in mind for anyone who drafts an
did.
Eagles running back in the future.
Well,
All right, what's up, Paul? You realizing
No,
the
he
truth?
did.
You realizing the
was
truth?
Week 1. Yeah, 1 was week 1. Okay, so give the 7th round rookie a break.
Come on.
No, I know.
He wasn't 7th round.
No, don't get
I
me
thought he
wrong.
was.
I'm not saying that his goose eggs are talent based. I think that it's from the team as well.
Fair enough.
Jahmyr Gibbs, welcome to the D tier. Not a bad tier to be in for your rookie season because he's got a lot of people to prove wrong. Are you guys high on Jahmyr Gibbs? Paul, what do you think about Jahmyr Gibbs?
I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think this year, the D tier is perfect for him. They did trade Swift immediately after drafting him, but they also signed David Montgomery to a pretty lengthy deal. So I can see something very similar to what they did last year, where Montgomery's the guy who gets all the touchdowns, and Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy who handles everything between the 20s. And if that's the case, Gibbs is not going to be scoring many touchdowns. It's going to be all Montgomery. Jamal Williams set the franchise record for touchdowns last year. They looked at him as the scorer. And so Gibbs, I think they might use just explosively in between the 20s, which will affect his fantasy value if he cannot get in the end zone. And I am concerned about David Montgomery. That's the big thing.
Yeah. I think that David Montgomery, like he had a pretty like average year last year. And I'm higher on David Montgomery than most. I'd probably say I'm like where Jahmyr Gibbs' ADP is right now, which is like 7th round in redraft currently. I would gladly take him there. But I would not sleep on David Montgomery because I do think he's going to get those touchdowns for the Lions. So up next, we've got Javonte Williams in the D tier. He's got a lot to prove, but Bob thinks he has what it takes. Bob, take it away.
I think he does have what it takes. Again, there's a huge asterisk here, and this is assuming he comes off the injury, relatively quick and doesn't pull a J.K. Dobbins and go back and on like not the injured
Yeah,
list,
like
but
come
go back
back
to
too
being
early.
go back to being injured and missing a few games in the middle of the season again. So hopefully they don't rush him. But when people were saying catastrophe that he's not going to play this year, it looks like he might not even be on the PUP list to start the year. So that's why he makes it in the D tier, because this is a guy that when he's healthy, he probably could be in the B tier if he was healthy all year last year. So Javonte Williams, I'm expecting him to come back and not have, the an amazing season or anything like that. But I think if he comes back and is healthy and they don't rush him back, that he could easily come back and be a D tier running back and have some pretty good floor games, because we saw him in, I think it was week 1 last year, catch like 10 passes out of the backfield. So, I would say look out for him. In redraft, I would not reach on him at all. Please don't, because that'd be unwise. But Samaje Perine, great
Yeah.
value play.
Yeah, seriously, he's going in like the 13th round in redraft leagues. It's
Exactly.
disgusting. Yeah, the Broncos definitely got to score. They got to show that they can score more points on offense, or else Javonte Williams' value is going to tank as long as he's on the Broncos. Now, a team that does not have problems scoring the ball is the Cincinnati Bengals. And they still have Joe Mixon as their number one running back. They got rid of P. Ryan, so he is the number one running back. There are, I don't know if it's rumors. It is a fact. The Bengals do save like $10 million if they cut Joe Mixon after June 1st, which is coming up. We're going to see some players getting dropped to free up some cap space. Paul, Joe Mixon, are you happy that he's still on the list here?
The only reason he's on the list here is because he's still a Cincinnati Bengal at the time of recording this, and he is volume. They have openly, for years, committed to him as a workhorse back, even though he has been extremely inefficient. He did finish as the RB10 last year, but he had that 55-point game, if you all remember, which is essentially 3 very good fantasy games wrapped into one that completely inflated his stats. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they cut him because of those shenanigans that he pulled, a couple months ago or whatever with whatever was going on. He's got his issues, but the only reason he's on this D tier for me is because he is a workhorse back and he's going to get the ball.
And last but not least, guys, for our D tier, this is going to be it for our 2023 running back rankings in the tiered system for redraft leagues. We've got James Conner, Bob. James Conner scratches the surface in the D tier. You think that he deserves it? Explain to the audience why.
I think he deserves it because he is the unquestioned back in this backfield. There's no one that's going to, threaten his workload unless you're a Keontae Ingram truther, and he hasn't proved jack in the NFL yet. So the biggest question with James Conner is if he could stay healthy. When he's healthy, he produces. And you best believe that the Cardinals are probably going to be running the ball a lot more this season because Kyler Murray is out. I don't even know who their starting quarterback is currently. So there's really no reason that James Conner shouldn't be on this list, aside from the fact that maybe you think the Cardinals are just going to be so bad that he's going to have no room to run. And they actually did improve their offensive line a little bit in the draft as well. So I would honestly take James Conner over a couple of these guys in the D tier. So I'm higher on him than most, but he's going to be getting the ball if he's on the field. So he belongs in the D tier for me.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Your 2023 running back tier list for your redraft leagues. Again, we're getting closer and closer to the big day, which is redraft day. And you can never be too prepared for redraft season. So keep doing your mocks. Go back to our YouTube page. Me and Bob did a mock last week. You can check that out on the eye test fantasy. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Go ahead and like our pages. Our social media handles are down below. Go ahead and like this video. Comment who you think. Who did we forget? Who did we forget to add in? Who did we get wrong? Do you think Bijan deserves to be in the S tier? I know one of you does, but we're not there yet. We're not quite there yet. Once August hits, we'll start talking Bijan. Hey, guys, don't forget, next week, we're going to be doing wide receiver tiers. So get ready for that. We're going to rank all your favorite running backs. We've got a couple surprises for you. Thank you for watching. Everyone have a great weekend.
Peace.
Bye, Nick.